The auctioneer called Lot 61, and the room went quiet. Not the respectful quiet of a good animal entering the ring. The other kind. The kind where experienced men look at their boots and wait for it to be over. A 2-year-old registered Angus bull walked through the sale ring at the Valentine Livestock Auction in north-central Nebraska on a cold Saturday in April. Black, moderate frame, sound on his feet, nothing visibly wrong with him. But 3 of the most respected breeders in the Sandhills had already evaluated him in the pens that morning, and all 3 had walked away. Gavin Mercer from North Platte, 400 cows, bulls and catalogs, the kind of operation where genetics are a religion, had checked the bull's measurements and shook his head. Scrotal's at 34. We require 36 minimum. Can't sell a bull to my customers whose sire didn't meet threshold. Deb Atchison from Burwell looked at the growth data. Weaning weight 542. That's bottom third for his contemporary group. I can't put my name on bottom third growth. Marshall Klein from Mullen liked the bull's feet and his quiet disposition. Almost bid. Then he read the sire line. His daddy threw calving problems in a herd down in Kearney. Couple of C-sections. Can't bring that into my cow herd. 3 strikes before the bull ever entered the ring. The auctioneer started at 2,500, dropped to 2,000, 1,500. The room stayed quiet. A 2-year-old registered Angus with clean papers selling for less than a market steer, 1,900, sold, to a kid in the back row who hadn't spoken all day. Now I need to tell you about the kid, because this story only makes sense if you understand what $1,900 meant to him. Jesse Pruitt was 23 years old, 2 years out of the University of Nebraska, with an animal science degree and a student loan balance that sat on his chest every morning like a cinder block. He worked part-time at a feed mill in Ainsworth. He leased 160 acres of Sandhills grass from a retired rancher named Walt Dooley. A handshake deal, no contract, because Walt liked the kid's work ethic and didn't have grandchildren who cared about cattle. Jesse had 12 cows. 12. Bought 1 and 2 at a time from dispersal sales and Craigslist ads, mixed ages, mixed genetics, the kind of herd that established ranchers called a starter set, which was polite for, you're broke and trying anyway. $1,900 was everything in his cattle account, every dollar he'd saved for a bull. He couldn't afford a $4,000 sire from a reputable program. Couldn't afford $3,000. He'd sat through 40 lots watching animals he wanted sell to people with more money. Then Lot 61 came through the ring with no buzz and no competition, and Jesse saw something that 3 experienced breeders had looked right past: the bull's feet, short, tight, symmetrical, the kind of hoof structure that Jesse's professor at UNL had spent an entire semester drilling into his students. Feet last longer than muscle. A bull with perfect feet and average growth will outproduce a bull with perfect growth and average feet, because the first bull is still walking at 12. The second bull is lame at 6. Jesse raised his hand. 1,900. The room barely noticed. He loaded the bull into a borrowed trailer and drove north. Named him Cedar, because he looked like the cedar posts that line every fence in the Sandhills. Nothing flashy about them, but they stand in the ground for decades without rotting. Jesse's mother called that evening. She lived in Kearney, taught high school math. She'd supported Jesse's dream of ranching the way mothers support dreams they don't fully understand. With love and money she couldn't afford and worry she couldn't turn off. How was the sale? Good. I bought a bull. How much? 1,900. Silence. Then, Jesse, that was your entire savings. I know, Mom. What if he doesn't work out? Then I'm in trouble. But Mom, his feet are perfect. His mother didn't understand what that meant. But she heard something in his voice she hadn't heard in 2 years of feed mill shifts and student loan statements. Certainty. Her son was certain about something for the first time since graduation, and that was worth more to her than $1,900. Be careful, she said. That's what mothers say when they can't say don't. Jesse turned Cedar out with his 12 cows in June, and for the first 3 weeks, nothing happened that would make anyone think he'd made the right decision. Cedar bred cows the way he did everything, quietly, without drama, no fence breaking, no aggression, no problems, but also no fireworks. He wasn't the kind of bull that covered everything in the pasture in the first 2 weeks. He took his time, moved through the herd at his own pace. Jesse watched and worried. By fall, 10 of 12 cows had settled, 83%, decent for a 2-year-old on his first season, not spectacular. Jesse sold some hay to cover winter feed costs and tried not to calculate how much was riding on 10 calves hitting the ground alive in March. March came, and this is where the story turned. The first calf was born on a Tuesday morning. Jesse found the cow at 6 a.m. Calf already on the ground, already standing, already nursing. No assistance. Birth weight, 59 pounds. Light for an Angus cross. Jesse wrote it down and worried. Light calves can mean weak calves. Second calf that afternoon. Same thing. On the ground, standing, nursing. 61 pounds. No problems. Third, fourth, fifth. Every calf born clean. Every calf standing within the hour. Jesse set his alarm for every 3 hours during calving season, dragged himself out of bed in the dark, drove to the pasture with a flashlight and a calving kit, and never opened the kit. Not once. 10 calves, 10 unassisted births. Average birth weight, 61 pounds. The worry about small calves lasted exactly 30 days. Because at 30 days, Jesse weighed them, and the numbers didn't make sense. His calves were gaining 3.4 pounds per day, on grass, no creep feed, no supplements, just Sandhills grass and their mother's milk. The breed average was 2.6 to 2.8. Jesse checked the scale, checked it again. Weighed a calf twice to make sure the equipment wasn't broken. It wasn't broken. His calves were just growing. Faster than they had any right to, given their birth weights and their sire's mediocre growth data. He called Dr. Nina Vogt, his vet in Ainsworth. Nina, something's wrong with my calves. Nina drove out the next day expecting illness. What she found was 10 healthy calves gaining weight at a rate she hadn't seen in 20 years of practice. Nothing's wrong with them, she said, reviewing the data. Something's right with them. Jesse, your bull is transmitting feed efficiency. His calves are converting grass to muscle at a rate significantly above breed average. It's a genetic trait, one of the hardest to identify because it doesn't show on the sire, only shows in the offspring. Jesse sat on the tailgate of his truck and let that settle. So, the reason his weaning weight was low doesn't mean what people thought it meant. Low weaning weight in the sire, high feed conversion in the calves. The trait expresses differently across generations. The breeders who passed on him were reading the data correctly and drawing the wrong conclusion. What about the calving problems? His sire's reputation? Nina had looked into that too. 2 C-sections out of 43 births. 4.6%. Breed average for calving difficulty is 8 to 12. His sire was actually below average for problems. But somebody told somebody who told somebody, and by the time the story reached Valentine, the whole line was blacklisted. One conversation, repeated enough times, became fact. Jesse let that sink in. 3 breeders passed on this bull because of a number that was 2 centimeters below threshold, a growth figure that meant the opposite of what they assumed, and a calving rumor that was statistically better than average. 3 professionals, 3 wrong conclusions. 1 kid in the back row with the right eyes. October. Weaning. Jesse loaded 10 calves and hauled them to the Ainsworth sale barn expecting 600 a head. Market price for average Angus calves in the Sandhills. They weighed 612 average, 50 to 90 pounds heavier than their contemporaries. Same grass, same county, different sire. A feedlot buyer from Grand Island was in the stands. He'd been tracking the lots, marking weights, doing what feedlot buyers do. After the sale, he found Jesse in the parking lot. Those your calves? Lot 14 through 23? Yes, sir. What's the sire? Registered Angus. I paid $1,900 for him at Valentine. The buyer looked at Jesse for a long time. The look that men give when they're recalculating someone. I'll give you a $200 premium per head next year. Standing offer. Same sire, same management, I'll take every calf you produce. Jesse did the math on the drive home. 10 calves at market price had brought $6,200. Next year, with the premium, the same calves would bring an extra $2,000. On 12 cows and a bull that cost less than a used truck. Not a fortune. But the math was changing. Walt Dooley had been watching from his kitchen window. The way retired ranchers watch. Without asking, without interfering. Keeping a quiet inventory of what the kid next door was doing. He drove over the next Saturday with a thermos and a question. Your calves weighed heavier than anything I raised on that ground in 30 years. What's different? The bull. Walt looked at Cedar in the pasture. Moderate, black. The kind of animal you'd drive past without slowing down. I'll run 20 of my cows with him next season. 50-50 split on calves. Jesse didn't hesitate. Deal, year 2. 32 cows total. 27 settled. Birth weights averaging 63. 0 calving assistance. Weaning weights in the top 15% of the region. A feedlot in Grand Island and 2 more in central Nebraska put in standing orders. The premium held, the numbers held. Cedar wasn't a fluke, he was a pattern. Nina tested 5 calves for residual feed intake, the university measure of how efficiently an animal converts feed to gain. The results confirmed what the scales already said. Cedar's calves were in the top 10% for conversion efficiency in the state database. She told Jesse something he'd remember for the rest of his career. The most economically important trait in beef cattle isn't growth, it's efficiency. The difference between a calf that costs $3 a day to feed and one that costs $2.20. Over a feeding period, that's hundreds of dollars per animal. Your bull is printing money. And nobody at that auction could see it because it doesn't show up on a data sheet. It shows up in the feed bunk. The call came in November of the second year. Gavin Mercer, North Platte. The first breeder who'd walked away from Cedar at Valentine because his scrotal circumference was 2 centimeters below threshold. Mr. Pruitt, I've been hearing about your calves. I'd like to discuss a semen collection arrangement. Jesse recognized the name. The man who'd looked at Cedar, measured him, and decided he wasn't worth $1,500. Now calling to ask for access to the genetics he'd left on the table. How much? Mercer named a stud fee. Jesse thought about it. Not about the money. About the morning he sat in the back row at Valentine with his hat pulled low and $1,900 that represented every decision he'd made since graduation. About the 3 men who said no because the numbers told them to. About the kid who said yes because the feet told him to. I appreciate the interest, Mr. Mercer, but Cedar's not available. His genetics work through my calves. My calves work through relationships I've built with buyers who showed up when nobody else was paying attention. I'm not going to bypass those people. You're leaving money on the table, son. I've been on the table, Mr. Mercer. It's not a good place to be. The line went quiet. Then Mercer said something Jesse didn't expect. Your father would have liked that answer. Jesse's chest tightened. His father, Dale Pruitt, had been a ranch hand in the Sandhills his whole life. Never owned land. Never owned more than a handful of cows. Died of a heart attack at 51 while fixing fence on someone else's property. Jesse was 17. You knew my dad? Worked with him one summer in the 80s. Best hand I ever had. I offered him a full-time position. He turned it down because he wanted to stay close to his kid. Jesse sat in his truck in the dark for a long time after that call. Cedar is 6 now. He covers 50 cows between Jesse's herd and Walt's. His calves sell before they're weaned. 3 feedlots have standing orders. The premium has settled at $200 above market. Consistent, reliable, built on performance that repeats year after year. Walt co-signed a loan for 80 adjacent acres last spring. Jesse runs 240 acres now. 32 cows of his own. Paid off his truck. Student loans almost gone. A real operation where there used to be a starter set and a borrowed trailer. His mother drove up from Kearney last fall to see the place. Walked the pasture with Jesse. Looked at the cows. Looked at the calves. Looked at Cedar standing near the fence line where the Middle Loop River cuts through the hills. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then, your dad would have cried if he saw this. Yeah. Jesse's voice cracked, and he wouldn't have been surprised. He always said, The good ones don't look like much. They just show up and do the work. Like father. Like bull. Cedar doesn't look like a bull that changed a young man's life. He looks like a fence post with legs. Moderate. Quiet. Nothing that makes you stop your truck on the county road. But 3 breeders said no to him because they measured the wrong things. A kid said yes because he measured the right ones, and everything that happened after, the calves, the premiums, the acres, the standing orders, the student loans disappearing one payment at a time, all of it traces back to a cold Saturday in April when a 2-year-old bull walked through the ring at Valentine and the room went quiet. The wrong kind of quiet, until one hand went up in the back row, and the quiet became something else entirely.